Bill Maher didn't attack Republicans, he didn't go after conservatives. This time, he aimed straight at his own side, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the most recognizable face of the modern left, the symbol of democratic socialism in America. Maher compared her politics to a dating profile, perfect on paper, but disastrous once you meet it in the real world. He warned that AOC and her allies aren't just promoting bold ideas, they're flirting with an ideology that collapses every time it's tested, from Vermont's failed healthcare experiment, to Venezuela's economic freefall, to the stark contrast between countries that embrace capitalism and those that don't. Maher's message was blunt: AOC isn't just challenging the right, she's risking the future of her own party, and if Democrats don't stop swiping right on socialism, they won't just lose elections, they'll lose everything. This wasn't outrage. It was a warning, and almost no one is paying attention. The studio lights came up softly, not harsh, not blinding, but bright enough to feel exposed. The kind of lighting that makes everything look polished on the surface while quietly revealing every crack underneath. The audience had settled into their seats, coats folded over laps, coffee cups tucked beneath chairs. It was that familiar Friday night energy, relaxed, entertained, slightly smug. This was real time with Bill Maher. Safe territory. Predictable rhythms. Laughs where laughs were expected. Bill Maher stood center stage, not pacing, not restless. Calm. Too calm. One hand rested lightly on the desk as if grounding himself. The other held his note cards, though he barely glanced at them. His posture wasn't aggressive. It was resigned. The posture of someone who had said this before, many times, and watched no one listen. A faint chuckle rippled through the crowd as he opened with a joke. The timing was perfect. The delivery smooth. The audience leaned in, comfortable, unaware they were about to be made uncomfortable. Democratic socialism, Bill began, his voice casual, almost playful, is like a dating profile. A few laughs. Familiar setup. The kind of line people expected from him. Everything looks great, he continued, lifting an eyebrow, letting the beat stretch just long enough, until you actually meet up in the real world. The laughter came louder this time. But something underneath it shifted. A few people exchanged glances. Bill didn't smile. He let the laughter die on its own, refusing to ride it. And then, he added quietly, reality shows up. The room cooled. Not physically, but emotionally. The temperature dropped a degree in the way tension does when humor turns into warning. Bill straightened slightly. His tone sharpened, not angry, not loud, precise. Surgical. For decades, he said, Bernie Sanders. Big promise was simple. Single-payer healthcare for all. Not complicated. Just. Ambitious. He paused. The word hung there. For 340 million Americans. The audience murmured. Bill nodded, as if agreeing with them. Sounds great. On paper. He looked down briefly, then back up. But when liberal, tie-dyed, maple syrup-soaked Vermont tried to do it, he said, for just 626,000 people. He snapped his fingers. It collapsed. A beat. No joke. No punchline. Just silence. Collapsed faster, Bill added dryly, than that poor podium in the Oval Office last week. The laugh came late and uneasy. The kind people give when they're not sure whether they should. Bill didn't push for more. He let the room sit in it. And that's the problem, he continued, stepping away from the desk now. Democratic socialism always sounds compassionate. Moral. Progressive. Until it has to survive contact with math. The camera cut briefly to the audience. Some nodded. Some didn't. A woman in the second row folded her arms tighter. And before anyone gets offended, Bill said, raising a hand, Bernie, AOC, Zoran Memdani, they're not Democrats. A murmur swept through the room. They'll tell you that themselves, he said. They're democratic socialists. Different thing. Very different thing. He let that land. And what we're watching right now, Bill continued, voice lowering, is the Democratic Party flirting with socialism the way your friend flirts with their toxic ex. The audience laughed, harder this time, but Bill's face didn't change. You know the moment, he said. When someone yells, don't text them. And they text them anyway. A ripple of recognition. Nervous laughter. That's where we are. The screen behind him shifted subtly. A still image of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez appeared. Confident. Composed. The rising face of the movement. Bill glanced back at the screen, then returned his gaze to the audience. AOC recently responded to critics like me, he said, with the classic defense. He tilted his head, mimicking the tone without mocking it outright. Just get to know him. A clip rolled briefly. AOC's voice filled the studio, calm, earnest, encouraging skepticism to dissolve through personal connection. If you have the ability to meet someone in person, she said on screen, you should meet them before you judge. The clip ended. Silence followed. Bill exhaled slowly. Political Tinder, he said. Swipe right on socialism and see what sticks. A few laughs. A few groans. But here's the funny part, he continued. She's suddenly the queen of listening. Bill leaned forward slightly now, voice tightening. Yet she never seems to extend that same curiosity to Donald Trump. Or conservatives. Or most of the country. The audience stirred. This wasn't just critique anymore. This was accusation. Selective empathy, Bill said. It's either ironic or convenient. The room felt heavier. The applause that usually interrupted him didn't come. Even moderates in her own party, he continued, are raising eyebrows so high they're practically in orbit. The camera cut to another clip, a host asking AOC about skeptics within her own party, particularly swing district Democrats nervous about being associated with radical messaging. What do you say to them? The interviewer asked. AOC smiled politely. Get to know him, she replied again. Calm. Reassuring. The clip ended. Bill didn't smile this time. And that's when I realized, he said slowly, this isn't about persuasion. He paused. It's about denial. The studio felt different now. The audience sat straighter. Less laughter. More listening. And while they're doubling down, Bill continued, I feel like the designated driver at 2 a.m. A smattering of laughter. You know. That guy, he said. Sober. Watching everyone else slam tequila shots. Begging them to stop before they wreck the car. He looked straight into the camera now. And nobody's listening. The screen behind him shifted again. A satellite image filled the background, the Korean peninsula at night. One side, Bill said, gesturing behind him, looks like Times Square. The bright lights of South Korea glowed. The other, he continued, looks like someone forgot to pay the electric bill. North Korea lay dark. Nearly invisible. This, Bill said, isn't ideology. It's evidence. The audience was quiet now. No laughter. No applause. And then there's Venezuela, he added, voice firm. In 1990. Richer than Poland. He let the statistics sit. Poland chose capitalism. Venezuela chose socialism for the 21st century. He shook his head. Turned out it was just the old kind. Shortages. Inflation. Collapse. Exodus. The words weren't on the screen, but everyone could see them. And now, Bill said, 8 million people have fled. He let out a breath. That's not theory. That's history. The camera pushed in closer. Bill's expression wasn't angry. It was tired. And yet, he said, we're told New York will be different. He raised an eyebrow. That somehow, magically, this time. It'll work. The audience shifted again. Someone coughed. A chair creaked. Zoran Memdani. Bill continued, seems like a nice guy. Young. Charismatic. Full of energy. He nodded. So was every revolution right before it collapsed. A few sharp laughs broke the tension. But here's the thing, Bill said, lowering his voice. This isn't about personality. He leaned on the desk again. It's about patterns. The room felt like it was holding its breath. And patterns, Bill said, don't care about intentions. He paused. Long deliberate. Next, he said quietly, let's talk about Bernie Sanders. The audience leaned forward. Because they knew what was coming. And Bill wasn't done. The name alone changed the air. Bernie Sanders. You could feel it ripple through the studio, like a familiar chord struck in a room full of people who'd heard it 1,000 times but still reacted instinctively. Some leaned back. Others leaned forward. A few crossed their arms, already bracing. Bill Maher didn't rush it. He knew the weight the name carried. He let the silence stretch just long enough to feel intentional. Bernie, he said finally, not mocking, not dismissive, has been fighting the same fight for a very long time. A beat. Single-payer healthcare. He nodded, as if acknowledging the sincerity behind it. For everyone. All 340 million Americans. The audience murmured again. This was familiar territory. Almost sacred to some. And look, Bill added quickly, holding up a hand, I get why it sounds good. He paced now, slow steps across the stage. Healthcare is expensive. People are scared. People are tired. They want security. He stopped walking. But here's the part no one likes to talk about. The screen behind him shifted again. This time, an aerial shot of Vermont. Green hills. Small towns. Quaint streets. Bernie's home state, Bill said. Tie-dyed. Progressive. About as friendly to socialist ideas as you're going to find in America. A few chuckles. They tried it, he continued. Single-payer healthcare. Just for Vermont. He raised one finger. Population, 626,000. He snapped his fingers again. And it collapsed. The snap echoed louder this time. The room was silent. Costs exploded, Bill said. The math didn't work. The numbers didn't add up. He shrugged. And that was the best-case scenario. A woman in the front row shook her head slightly. Someone whispered to their neighbor. And now, Bill said, turning back to the camera, I'm supposed to believe New York City is going to pull it off. The image behind him changed. Manhattan skyline. Crowded streets. Endless motion. A massive, complex, expensive metropolis, he continued, with infrastructure already hanging on by a thread. He leaned forward. If Vermont couldn't make it work, he said quietly, why would this? The question hung there, unanswered. I know, Bill went on, his tone shifting, the kids think anything that happened before they showed up on Earth doesn't count. A ripple of laughter cut through the tension. But it did happen, he said. We ran this experiment. Many times. And the results, he added, are always obvious. The Korean Peninsula image returned. Bright south. Dark north. This isn't rhetoric, Bill said. It's night photography. A few nervous laughs. And Venezuela? He continued. That wasn't ancient history. That was modern. He paused. That was hope. The camera cut briefly to the audience. Faces serious now. Engaged. Which brings me back, Bill said, to the brand confusion. He returned to the desk, resting both hands on it. Bernie, AOC, Mamdani, they're not Democrats. He repeated it slower this time. They're democratic socialists. He shrugged. No shame in that. They say it themselves. But most voters, he continued, don't notice the difference. He leaned closer to the camera. And that's dangerous. The screen shifted again. Book covers. Social media profiles. Crowd shots from rallies. Because here's the part that makes my head hurt, Bill said, rubbing his temple slightly. The people screaming loudest that capitalism is broken. He gestured to the images. Owe everything they have to it. A beat. Bernie's book deals. AOC's brand. Massive platforms. Millions of followers. He raised an eyebrow. That doesn't exist under real socialism. The audience reacted audibly now. Murmurs. Gasps. A few claps quickly silenced. In an actual socialist system, Bill said, voice steady, you don't become famous by criticizing the system. He paused. The system criticizes you. Another pause. And then, he added quietly, you disappear. The weight of that sentence settled heavy. And don't get me wrong, Bill continued, stepping back, capitalism isn't perfect. He sighed. It's messy. Uneven. Frustrating. He smirked faintly. But compared to socialism's track record? He shook his head. Capitalism starts to look like the stable partner. The audience laughed nervously. You know the one, Bill said. Pays the bills. Keeps the lights on. He paused. Socialism, he added, is the ex who swears they've changed. A beat. That while holding a gas can. Laughter burst out, sharper this time. And yet, Bill said, the party keeps flirting. He looked around the room. Which brings me to someone they ignored. The name landed next. Abigail Spanberger. The screen showed her speaking at a rally. Calm. Controlled. Centered. Years ago, Bill said, she warned the party. He quoted her slowly. Move back to the center. Or we'll implode. He nodded. She said stop using the word socialist. The image changed. And guess what? Bill said. She won. Applause broke out briefly before fading. Not by channeling Che Guevara, he added dryly, but by not doing so. The smile faded from his face. Did the party listen? He didn't wait for an answer. Of course not. The audience laughed, but there was frustration in it now. They ignored moderates, Bill continued. They ignored the data. He leaned forward again. And that silence? He paused. That silence is permission. The studio felt tight. Focused. When a party refuses to rein in its extremes, Bill said, those extremes don't just influence the party. He looked straight into the camera. They become the party. He exhaled. And that, he said, is how you lose elections. The screen behind him faded to black. Bill straightened. Which brings us, he said quietly, to the numbers. The audience leaned in. Because numbers don't argue. The lights didn't change, but the mood did. This was no longer commentary. It was diagnosis. In 2024, Bill said, 13 Democrats won in districts Donald Trump carried. The audience reacted immediately. Surprise. Recognition. All moderates, he added. He let that breathe. Not a single democratic socialist among them. The words landed like a gavel. This isn't opinion. Bill continued. This is evidence. The screen behind him filled with headlines. Think tank analyses. Election breakdowns. Every autopsy said the same thing, Bill said. Move to the center. He shook his head slowly. Even the New York Times, he added, finally admitted it. A few laughs. Bitter ones. They said the partisans were wrong, Bill continued. That the party moved too far left after Obama. He leaned back slightly. And still, he said, the DNC doubled down. The audience groaned softly. They treated good advice, Bill said, like a blender. A pause. Tossed it in. And drank a chaos smoothie. Laughter erupted, sharp and knowing. Moderates are ignored, he continued. Socialist messaging is amplified. He raised his eyebrows. They're not stepping away from capitalism. A beat. They're texting socialism at 2 a.m. The audience laughed, then quieted. And here's the thing, Bill said. Voters aren't asking for revolution. He spread his hands. They want stability. Competence. Balance. He looked out over the crowd. They don't want TikTok politics. A few claps. They want results. The screen shifted again. Venezuela. Empty shelves. Long lines. People leaving. Socialism doesn't just fail, Bill said softly. It fails spectacularly. He paused. It doesn't fade out. Another pause. It crashes. The studio was silent now. 8 million people left Venezuela, he continued. That's New York City. He let that sink in. So when AOC says New York is the rule, Bill said, not the exception. He leaned forward. Brace yourselves. The tension was palpable. Because if socialism is the rule, he continued, the outcome isn't prosperity. He paused. It's collapse. He exhaled slowly. And that brings us back, Bill said, to Vermont. A faint smile returned. On paper, he said, single-payer healthcare looks beautiful. He gestured. In speeches, it's inspiring. He shook his head. In reality, it crumbled. He rested his hands on the desk. If it couldn't work there, he said quietly, it won't work here. He straightened one last time. Democratic socialism, Bill concluded, is like a dating profile. A beat. Looks amazing. Another beat. Until you meet it. The audience erupted. Applause. Some cheers. Some stunned silence. Bill nodded once. And America, he said, voice calm, steady, resolved, doesn't want ideology. He looked directly into the camera. It wants common sense. The lights dimmed slightly. And if the party wants to win again, Bill finished, it needs to stop swiping right on disaster. The applause swelled as the music rose. The camera pulled back. And the room finally exhaled.